Hey everyone, welcome to Webcology on WMR.fm. It's Jim Hedge from Digital Always Media and Christine Schackinger from Sites Without Walls. This show is recorded live to podcast on the 6th of July, 2023. Christine, how you doing today?
Okay, we finally got summer temperatures in Las Vegas, so it's been a little hot this week, but otherwise good.
It's been a little hot all around the world. In fact, the
Yeah,
last 3 days in a row have been the hottest days ever recorded in human history.
and well, yeah, in human history, I think it was what 125, was it 1,000 or a million years ago was the last time it was this hot.
Yes, and by the way, they
Yeah.
weren't actually measuring temperatures back then. And when we
No,
say
no,
human
no.
history, we actually mean modern history because accurate weather recording.
Well, they can tell a lot though by, other things that, temperature wise. So, layers. But what's interesting is Vegas has been unseasonably cool from January until a week ago. And then now we're normal. But it's funny to watch the national news because they're like, the heat wave in Las Vegas. They're like, no, this is just July. This is
Well,
we're one of the few areas that are not abnormal. Everywhere else in the country is though. So,
there is abnormal heat sitting over Texas. There's abnormal heat
yeah,
sitting over the east. There's abnormal heat over the Great Lakes Basin, where I'm
there is
at, and
very dangerous.
yeah, it's pretty rough out there. Hydrate yourselves. Be really careful just walking to and from the shops. The main street of my neighborhood is a block and a half from my place. So I just went out food foraging for lunch before the show, and I came back with a leaden chest. It is so hot you can barely breathe outside.
Yeah, and you
Um,
have humidity. So
Now, luckily, most of us work inside, unless you have your computer on a very long extension cord in your the backyard, public park, or the library. You're probably working from home in an air conditioned, at least sheltered environment, which is good because it's freaking hot outside. So speaking, I mean, that was supposed. I was trying to work my way into things are heating up sort of joke, but things. I mean, like things are heating up. The Threads is here. It was released, supposed to be released today, but actually got released last night.
yes,
Um, the Twitter killer. What do you think?
maybe. I don't know yet because it's missing a lot of features. I have a feeling they just took advantage of the, hey, Musk decided to do things at Twitter that caused him lots of problems. Let's take advantage of the opportunity because we'll talk about those things later. But yeah, so it's works very much like Twitter. In fact, I mean, almost identically to Twitter. It just is missing a lot of features. Like it doesn't have a great search function. They didn't put in hashtags. There's no messaging. There's no GIFs. There is a bunch of like little things that still need to be done, but the head of the project is on Threads. His name is Mosier, it looks like.
At
I don't know for sure.
Adam Mosseri.
Yeah, Mosier. Okay, I'll take that. And he's responsive. He's responsive. He's asking people to give him feedback and questions and giving timelines. So we'll see. I think it does it have the potential to be a Twitter killer? It definitely does, except they're going to have to add a desktop version. Right now, it's only on the phone. If they don't add a desktop version, it won't be a Twitter killer because a lot of us just use it during our workday on the computer.
It would also be very helpful if they added, I don't know, the European Union.
Yeah, that's another
Currently,
problem.
Threads is not available in the EU due to European privacy laws, and that's actually about how Meta and Instagram network and distribute information. Not necessarily a problem with Threads itself, but those issues have to be cleared up between Meta and the EU before Threads is going to be allowed to popularize itself in Europe. I think that's going to happen fairly quickly because
Yeah,
I'm on Threads now. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't work exactly like Twitter in that I wrote something pretty innocuous and I did not have a bunch of Nazis try to shoot me down.
I know, right? Although I saw one of the hate group people. They're on the platform now, so we'll see how long that lasts. But it was nice. It was nice for 24 hours. So,
Well,
so
for what it's worth, and actually you provided this example, it looks as if Threads is going to try to pre-warn people about users that have violated Instagram's terms of service. The example given was Donald Trump Jr.'s new Threads profile is comes with a "this guy mightn't be telling the truth" warning.
It does. It definitely does. And I'm sure that's a carryover from his time on Instagram. I don't think it just happened in the last 24 hours, but it is like a warning like you get on Facebook if you don't use Instagram, where it says like this may be telling a lie. Well, his account, if you go to follow him, it tells you this account shares a lot of false information. So I think that probably very helpful and, overall. So we'll see. And then the other thing is apparently Meta tried to launch Threads years ago and then abandoned it. So it is interesting that they called this new project Threads too. But yeah, it's hopefully they'll address all those issues. I mean, I have my issues with Zuckerberg and Meta and Facebook and how they've handled hate groups and hate speech and all that on the platform, but they're under a lot of scrutiny all the time. And so if anyone's going to be more circumspect in the space of potential Twitter, replacements, it's probably going to be Meta, because they already have congressional heat on them for other actions that they did not take or things that they did not do. So I think if they can get the features right, that'll be the big test, because I don't use Facebook Twitter on my phone all that much. I use it probably 80% of the time on my desktop. And if there's no desktop app, I won't be using it that often.
That
But
is, yeah, that actually is another fairly major limitation to Threads. Currently, it's limited to iOS or Android apps only. You don't get this on your desktop. There is a desktop version of Instagram, although Instagram was also designed to work in the mobile environment more than the desktop environment. Everyone's walking around with a phone, with a camera phone, I should say. That's what Instagram's all about. This is different, though. This is a communications device more than a photo sharing device.
exactly, and it has to have a desktop version. There's just so many people that use it, like reporters, researchers, academics, famous people that aren't sitting on their phones all day. This isn't a teenage product, where they think that, or younger people, I should say, not just teenage, but there's a lot of younger people that are on their phones mostly. But once you have a regular job and you're sitting in front of your computer all day, you're not on your phone. So if they don't have a desktop version, I think they're going to have difficulties.
Yeah, although I do think people would describe this as an adolescent application in that it's barely been born and it's already running around thinking it owns the world.
Oh, you know how
Um,
many users they had this morning as of like 9
what,
a.m.?
8 million or so? It's just
23.
23 million. Excellent.
Yeah, 23 million. So people are coming over, and I've seen a lot of big brands on there. So that's why the reason I think if they get the features right and they add a desktop version, it could be a Twitter killer. Is it's very similar to Twitter, and it has all the big brands are already migrating to it. So that spells out potential large amounts of money for advertising when they start that to get that rolling. So Musk may have just by trying to force everybody this week to pay him more money, he may have put the final nail in the coffin. So we'll see.
Um,
So
One of the people groups that will not be advertising on Threads, Instagram, Meta, or on Google is Canadian, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and British Columbian governments so far. Other provincial governments are thinking of signing on, but as of the beginning of next month, the Canadian government is pulling all of its ads from Google and from Meta properties in retaliation for Google and Meta cutting off news access to Canadians in retaliation for the Canadian government demanding Meta and Google pay for news that they are repurposing and passing on to their consumers. Confused? You won't be after you read our convenient scorecard. Um, so yeah, Canadian government is pulling out all of its advertisements from Facebook, Meta, and Google properties. Admittedly, that only amounts to about $100 million or so in spend a year across all properties. but still, it's and then that is 100 million Canadian, by the way. But it's still a fair chunk of change.
Well, I mean, we should explain to people why there is this feud between Canadian government and these agencies
Well,
based on, you
here's
probably
here's
can
here's the
speak to
thing
it
to
better.
keep in mind. What's happening in Canada is going to be happening in America. It's going to be happening in Britain. It's going to be happening in a number of other countries, but it's happening in Canada first. It actually happened in Australia first, but there was a settlement between the large tech houses and the Australian media. So what's happening is the Canadian government has put forward a bill C-15. C-15, among
18.
many, is a very large piece of legislation. Covers a number of things, including getting the social media and news aggregators, Google News and Facebook primarily, to compensate Canadian media outlets when they take stories, say published by the National Post, the Toronto Star, CTV News, etc. When they take these stories and they publish them on their own pages and repurpose them and serve them up to their consumers, you're bypassing the Canadian news organization that created this content and taking the ad dollars for yourself. That's gutting journalism in this country and in many countries around the world, including the United States. Canadian government is one of the first governments to try to take on the social media and search companies. And being a small country of only 40 million consumers, it's not hard to slap us around a lot. And that, in fact, is what's happening. Google and Meta are no longer publishing news in Canada as of the beginning of next month. And in turn, Canada's slapping back by not giving them taxpayer dollars for advertising.
We'll see how it plays out, and they'll probably reach a deal like they did with Australia. So,
I
and by
suspect
the way,
so.
quick
I,
correction, it's C-18 instead of C-15.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
C-18. And I suspect that both Meta and Google are playing hardball with Canada because Canada's one of the first in a whole line of other countries that are trying to introduce similar legislation. So beat up on the Canadians, and maybe the Argentinians won't put as much pressure on.
Definitely possible. But I mean, there has to be some sort of uh, middle space where, the publishers don't get completely, messed over by, and while the big companies make a lot of money off of what they do. So,
Sadly, that's not going to happen, at least not from Meta or Google. The government uh, might compensate publishers, but I think that's also fairly unlikely. We'll see what happens.
yeah,
I think a lot of publishers are going to be collateral damage, but
yeah, sadly, yeah, true.
not as much collateral damage as, I don't know, everything you ever wrote on Twitter was. Okay, so getting stuff into Google and getting that distribution from Google is really important. And the Canadian media is going to lose a heck of a lot of money by not being distributed by Google. They'd make even more money if Google and Facebook was like, paying them for their content. But being cut off from Google means you are cut off from the greatest fire hose of reference ever existed.
Yes.
So do you remember last week where Twitter basically DDoS'd itself?
Well, it de-indexed itself.
Well, that it
Kind of,
de-indexed itself as a result of trying to fix a problem it created for itself.
but that's such a weird way to fix that problem. So for those who don't know, uh, Twitter decided to what they call rate limit your feed depending on if you pay him or don't pay him. So if you didn't pay him, you got 600 views. I'm putting that in quotes, or you get 6,000 if you pay him. The 600 includes anything that just appears in your feed. And if you've ever been on Twitter, you know, you have this like one feed that's everything, and you may not read any of the posts on it, but it's going through your feed, and those counted against you. So, so people are like at like 10 in the morning, like, well, I'm done for the day because I can't read anything more on Twitter today, and you're not allowed to post, and you weren't allowed to do anything on the platform to stop scraping. And you and I both deal with scraping, and that is definitely not the way I know any programmer ever would deal with scraping. So I kind of wonder if that's really the reason, but that's what he says
Okay,
is the
so how
reason.
did this affect Google?
Well, you and I both know as soon as you make content inaccessible to Google, they don't tend to like to keep that content around. So Google couldn't access the content. And after it was pretty fast. How fast was it? I think it was like over 48 hours.
Mhm.
They had lost 50% of their estimated 50% of their visibility in Google. So
So,
that's a lot.
so people might ask themselves, how does this happen so fast? And this is actually kind of cool. It's a really cool illustration of how Google works. Google will hit a page as often as it thinks is necessary to record changes happening at that page, so it gets all the information that's available on the web. Now, most of the pages we work with, you know, they change when product changes or inventory changes or whatever. But for the most part, they don't change that much, right? Um, I have some clients who have pages that have been the same for years, and other parts of their website change fairly frequently. And so Google will even prioritize what parts of a website it visits. Areas that change fairly frequently, it's going to hit fairly frequently because it perceives change there. Areas that don't change frequently, well, you know, it can take a look, sees that nothing has changed, so it just goes away and assumes that all is good. So Twitter obviously gets hit really frequently by Google. It comes back to visit like all the time, or even more so. Twitter feeds Google rather than Google coming to it.
Yes, they
And
have a fire
suddenly,
hose.
kapoof, a big crimp in the hose. Google goes to look, see if that information's available. It's not. What's a Google to do? It just, you know, basically it's like a brain shutting down.
Well, they had the fire hose, which probably made it much faster. So for those that don't know, Twitter is directly fed into Google. Google doesn't have to come crawl it. So if the fire hose suddenly stopped giving Google information, well, Google would just probably start dropping those posts because it's not there. So
No,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure Google's going to go take a look to see what it can see, and then it's going to get immediately crimped because there's a limit to the number of posts it's allowed to see. And this is Twitter. It's the change happens so quickly that even if Google goes to check out to see if there is content there, it's still going to get cut off.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. Of course, you know, Twitter doesn't have an SEO. Had they had an SEO, consulted an SEO, they might have told them it was a really bad idea to not
So
give Google their feed.
according to Barry Schwartz at Search Engine Roundtable, as of this morning, changes made at Twitter have allowed content to start reappearing in Google again. It's not all back, but it's coming back. So that was really stupid, eh?
Gosh, but it was not, but if you had people that worked there, you might have had someone tell you, but since you don't, no, but they don't have an SEO. So they probably would have known if they had an SEO, but that was a pretty big mistake. So, I mean, Google's bringing it back. I see a lot of, journalists. I wish journalists would talk to SEOs before they publish stuff, saying that Google was acting against Twitter, and that's not what happened. It's literally how Google works. If they come across your page and the information is no longer there, they drop it from the search results. In this case, because they had a fire hose of information, it just dropped it really, really fast. So I did have a client once that accidentally took themselves off their own DNS in the morning, and by yeah, they took their website offline. But by afternoon, they had dropped like 40% in the rankings. It was very, very fast. So I don't know, we don't know the black box we're working with, but it can be that quick, even if you're not a big company like Twitter. So
Well, you know what? I really wish I could find a way to make a segue out of this one. This is a John Muellerism. No ranking factor compensates for missing relevance or missing content in general. No ranking factor compensates for missing relevance. So
Yeah,
John
I
Mueller
mean,
was asked one of those questions, and he gave a snappy answer. It's easy to forget a site doesn't just rank on its own; it only ranks for what it's relevant for. Um,
although
do you get the feeling sometimes that we're back in an era of magic bullet expectations from clients and people who know a little bit about SEO but don't actually understand SEO? Because
it's
that's
very
what he's getting
possible.
at here.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, I think we have a whole influx of new SEOs too, though, because they answer a lot of basic questions lately. So that, we've been a long time. So for us, it's like, what? But if you're new to SEO, maybe you don't know that you have to have relevance on the page. I had a big brand once that dropped out of number one for a massive term for their site. And I went to the page and I'm like, the term's no longer on the page at all, right? What? Like, so they'd taken the term off the page and they used some like snappy branded term they created, which meant nothing to Google. So now the page had literally no relevance to the item that they were trying to sell. As soon as we put the word back on the page, then it came right back up to number one. But it was kind of funny. So yes, you always have to have relevance, and this is a massive brand, like multi-billion-dollar brand. So all the links in the world aren't going to save you if the content doesn't relate to what someone's searching for.
So that's an important point to for Elon and the new junior SEO over at Twitter. If there's no relevant content, you're not going to rank for anything because there's just no content.
Yeah, if you don't give content to the search engines, they usually don't rank you. It's kind of a weird thing.
It is kind of weird. See, I desperately tried to find a good segue there, but it just wasn't there. But it was so close.
It was so close, so close, and yet so
Perhaps,
far away.
perhaps somebody could write, I don't know, a AI module or something to help me make these jokes.
Oh.
It would be awfully convenient, but then again, it would probably plagiarize off of some other person who thought they were a comic or something, eh?
Oh, well, LLMs don't consider it plagiarizing. It's just training.
Neither do comics. It's funny that way.
Comics are allowed under parody law. They're allowed. But LLMs,
They'll shank each other backstage for it, though. They'll seriously,
yeah.
you'll get
Oh
shanked for
yeah.
that,
Oh yeah.
like, and
I
rightly
helped his
so.
friend get off the ground with his comedy. He's actually a full-time comedian. He's done it for many years. But yeah, they'll shank each other over
Well,
these things.
if OpenAI co-founder Ilya Sutskever, I think I got that one right. Sutskever, I think I got that name right. Ilya Sutskever, um, has it their way, then OpenAI is going to create methods to use itself to keep other AI models in check, trying to prevent AI from going rogue.
Going, yes,
The big
yes.
fear has been if AI starts to train itself, then it's only a matter of time before it figures out that we're barely pre-adolescent meat puppets, and and starts taking matters into its own hands, or more likely, you know okay, there's this incredibly contentious algorithm that's being used in a number of property management companies, where they really try to optimize the entire business of landlording into a cut and dried thing rather than providing homes for people. But these algorithms are heartless and humanless, and designed to drive towards the greatest possible profit, regardless of the pain that they cause. if AI was to start developing and augmenting these kind of programs that got mass usage, I mean, honest to goodness, who knows what those implications are, or any other implication.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, they call it super intelligent AI. It's more intelligent than humans. And then OpenAI is dedicating 20% of its computer power over the next 4 years to solve the problem. And they're calling it the super alignment team to align it to human benefit. But then, of course, there are AI safety advocates who are like, well, by the time that AI would solve the AI problem, the AI would be out of control and already done the damage. So it's a very tenuous space. Like, um, how do you prevent AI from doing things like you just said? And with AI governing AI, is that a good thing? I don't know that that's a good thing.
well, it's a
So
very good question, and one of the more obvious questions that like you would have thought would have been asked back in November just sort of got answered in the last couple of weeks when ChatGPT or OpenAI itself is limiting ChatGPT, including ChatGPT for Bing, because of some pretty obvious copyright concerns, given that it trained itself on everything that was ever written. Copyright be damned.
well, and it's also it's the OpenAI Bing chat plugins in OpenAI that they're restricting because people are able to get it to print out paywall articles. So they're spending till they can figure out how to fix that. So basically, somebody just went to, like, I believe it was Fortune, and they're like, "Hey, I want you to print out this Fortune article behind the paywall," and it did. So that's what they're trying to prevent from that. Although they don't care about the copyrights when they're training on everything. And Google has put out a new privacy policy that it will train on anything public. It is it will do under Google Translate or any of their services, anything that's public information, they will go ahead and use it to translate. I don't know how that works with websites. Like if you have a robot's text on there that says don't crawl, I don't know if that still crawls, but I imagine it does as they're training. It's not the search engine part. So we'll see. But I have very, very strong feelings about the fact that this is copyright infringement. And if I was in university and I went out and I read a whole bunch of stuff and I just paraphrased all that stuff, a little bit of my own words, some of their words, I would be expelled from school if I didn't have citations on there, right? So the fact that they're going out and training on everybody's work and then publishing it with a chat model that just rewrites it in its own words is basically that. And though it's not illegal, I don't know if it falls under copyright infringement. It definitely is unethical if you were in an academic situation. So I don't know why we say it's cool because it's a big company doing it.
Well, most things in the world aren't as stringent as academic scenarios, unfortunately. And again, in much of our world, good enough is good enough. Um, and
But
again,
is it?
it is. I'm sorry, it is. I've watched TV for most of my 54 years, and I can assure you, for a lot of it, good enough is good enough. But there's again so many things that AI can do really well and solve, from diagnoses to well-written legal opinions. Don't get it.
No,
Don't it can give you a legal
no.
opinion. It can give you a great legal opinion. Do not get it to write your case for you. But it can give you an excellent. It can give you an excellent and extremely well-educated opinion
I'm,
that you cannot put in front of a judge.
but no, don't put it in front of a judge. You might
But it will. But
wind
it
up
will.
like the
But
lawyers
it will
might be
quote the law
disbarred.
quite well for you. It
It may
might throw
make it,
other stuff in. That's why you're a
yeah,
trained lawyer reading it.
it might make up some case studies, but case law. But
Um,
yeah, but it's still training on people's copyrighted materials without any compensation for those people. So to me, that's no different. And if I was a human, was like sitting down and reading stuff and then just rewriting it a little bit, it's not my thoughts, not my ideas, not my images. And I'm just using algorithms to make them undistinguishable enough that I can get away with copyright law. Indistinguishable enough. Sorry, undistinguishable.
the um, The other fear of AI that's come up this week, and this was actually, I think, a story from last week, but and we weren't able to get to it, but it's one that's absolutely worth mentioning, and for people to be on the lookout for. Um, Stable Diffusion software allows users, to describe using word prompts an image, and the program then goes and creates it for them using the images of, say, Donald Trump getting arrested. He doesn't actually put in handcuffs, and he wasn't actually led away by police, and there wasn't actually a big riot behind him while he was being led away by police, because all of those were AI images. They didn't actually happen, but it looked a lot like a real image. And if you were a Trump arrest fetishist, perhaps you could be very, happy about this image, even though it didn't actually happen. Well, something a little more frightening. AI is being used to simulate child sex abuse in images. And these images are out on the internet and being traded by pedophiles.
Pedophiles. Yeah.
And this, incidentally, is from a BBC.com report. So this isn't an American, Canadian, or North American problem. This is an international thing on the international body of the web. If you see images like this, there are 100 different places you can report them. In America, the FBI is extraordinarily interested. In Canada, the RCMP or OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, are interested. And in the UK, call them Matt. They'll be interested. But
Yeah.
again, it just what weirds me out is, um,
Everything about it, pretty much.
well, no, just we used to ask if the social media was aware of misinformation or hate or other action, or outright criminal activity being done on their networks. For instance, is somebody selling heroin using Facebook as a media, as a marketplace? Um, and for what it's for good or bad, the social networks seem to be able to crack down on stuff like that. If somebody is using Facebook to sell heroin, they don't get to do it for long, because either the social network catches them and kicks them off the platform, or the cops catch them. Um, how come the AI company Stable Diffusion, do they inspect? Do they have a clue what their engine is being used for?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, right? I'm sure they have some clue, and I'm sure they're trying to do something on their side, but it's a really difficult thing to monitor. They also apparently, although these images, so people do understand, even though they're not of like living children, it's probably the best way to say it, they're still illegal. It doesn't matter whether it was generated by AI or it was a photo someone took. It is still illegal. You still get arrested and you will still go to jail for it. But there's a site in Japan where cartoon drawings of children that are sexualized are not illegal, and that's where a lot of these are showing up. So, but it's hard to know. Like, they have to get good at moderating this kind of action on their platforms, but how do you do that? That's a hard thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's pretty awful. This is also used to. There's been some recent cases, although it's not highly prevalent yet. It has happened where someone will make a video or image of somebody using their face and likeness, and put it out there as a revenge porn, or blackmail somebody, even though it's not them. It looks like
Yeah.
them. So there are a lot of there's a lot of dangers in this technology being released the way it did so fast. And I know I say it all the time. I think it's great for things like science and medicine, and it's in a controlled environment with academics who understand its power and know what it does. But letting regular people just get online and do whatever they want with it is problematic tremendously. And that's why we have things like child porn being created by AI. So
Well, I think one of the strangest things about AI, and I want to remind listeners, it's almost been a year. We're in July now, And AI as a functioning, usable, you can play with it model has been around since November. So it's been 8 months now. And in that 8 months, the world's changed kind of markedly.
Well, here's,
Recently,
oh,
sorry?
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. You were
Well,
going
I was
somewhere.
about to say recently, several large media houses, I guess most notably BuzzFeed. Um, but I understand the ESPN has now gone to AI generated content, and they fired a number of their sports reporters.
It's so sad because truthfully, AI generated content is mediocre. It like sounds good, but it doesn't offer you anything especially insightful or interesting, which is why under the helpful content update, it talks about that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's something different. I digress. But yeah, but it doesn't offer anything. Like the sports reporter probably has a relationship with a bunch of the players, has insights, knows things about them that you wouldn't get. The chat GPT can only regurgitate what it's been trained on. So it's already information that exists. It's not anything new or different.
Well, the way we do things, it pretty much dictates the way our culture, our society, and our infosphere unfold. As Christine just noted, a good sports reporter has what makes a good reporter is their relationships. People trust them. People talk to them. They know who to talk to. They know how to talk to these people. They speak the same. They speak enough of the same language that an inside communication can happen, and from there comes the real stories. We're probably going to lose that with AI, but that's just an example of things that change. In the last 8 months, the economy of the web has changed. It's now a lot cheaper to produce large amounts of content, infinitely
Okay.
cheaper. In fact, you only have to pay $20 a month to produce large amount and however many tokens you need beyond that to produce large amounts of content. Is it good content? I don't know. Is it helpful content? I don't know. Um,
Not according to Google though. It's not.
well,
That's
again, sometimes it might be, sometimes it might not be.
no, no. If it's straight AI content, I'm not talking about edited content. That's different. But the helpful content update and then just general advice from Google has been your content can't just be well written or sound good. It has to be useful and helpful. And
Mhm.
useful and helpful are things that AI can't do because AI can only regurgitate what already exists. And it's not useful to put out another 1,000 articles about the exact same thing written differently.
Again, currently, some of that may actually be quite helpful and quite useful. But as we go along, and it trains on itself, it's only a matter of time before the utility of information gets basically bleached. Um,
Um, Well, yeah, especially as it trains on itself, so it'll degrade over time. But I'm still saying that, and I'll not die on this hill, but I'll stand on this hill. That when you read the helpful content update, it wants useful content, and since AI can only regurgitate what exists in just a different form, it is not helpful because they already have that content. If I go look up, I've had this weird thing where I wind up with what feels like food poisoning every Saturday night for 3 weeks. Who knows why? But when I look it up, there's 100 different articles already out there that say basically the exactly same thing. So Google doesn't need to index another 1,000 articles that say the same thing, and the AI can only regurgitate what it trained on. It cannot go outside what it trained on. So there's no new useful or helpful insights in that content. So if you're the first to market or you're the big boy on the block, you'll probably rank. But you're just putting out your health blog and you want to make some money on affiliate or something, and you're just regurgitating what's already out there with all this AI content, I don't think you're probably going to do very well. If you do, it won't be for very long. That's just my opinion. But if you read that, also the helpful content update says you can't write it with automation. So that's part of it. It says we're fine with AI, but you can't automate this content. So apparently you're not that fine with AI. But I do think that that's at some point search engines are going to have to start not indexing the content that's all regurgitated off the same trained information, because what does Google need with a trillion pages of the same stuff, an additional trillion pages of the same information? They don't.
oh, indeed. Indeed, and as I said, the utility of information is going to eventually bleach itself as
Yeah.
it becomes the snake eating its own tail phenomena. Um, what I'm trying to get at, though, is a more fundamental change, not just to how Google perceives and verifies information, but to how we work on the web, how we work together as effective teams. And I think this is more of a concern with where we're going to be 3 or 4 years from now than hell, even next year at this time than where we are right now. Because right now, all those skills that we still rely on to make the web work are still there. They're still present. They're still in the ecosystem. But as Chat GPT gets used as a replacement for GitHub, um, a lot of that skill of like puzzling together programming is going to go by the wayside. And I'm really
Mm,
concerned about that.
I am concerned about it, but I'm not concerned about it replacing GitHub because it has a lot of errors in it. I'm concerned more that Microsoft is working right now on developing a program that can write code to get rid of developers.
Indeed. Where are we going to
Yeah,
be a
which
few
is
years from
different.
now?
Yeah, and that's a different thing. Like the LLMs are highly inaccurate, and I know a lot of programmers that work with it, and it helps them like get past something or how to start a piece of code, but they have to constantly edit it. So I don't. It's not going to replace like real coders. But the Microsoft plan to train something that can is they have the resources and they have the technology to do that. And I also think that's just a pretty awful thing because really the only reason you're doing it is to not have to pay employees a salary. I mean, that's the only reason you're doing it. You're not doing it for any other reason. And it's just, I mean, yeah, you'll say efficiency or productivity, but it's just making people unemployed and unemployable. So I think that we need, as we've talked about before, rules and regulations around that. Because what are we going to do when we have a society of people that don't have jobs and don't pay taxes? Like, how are you going to have those firemen show up at your house when you have a fire if there's nobody to pay their salaries because nobody's paying taxes because the AI is doing all the work.
I'm
So,
pretty sure it was also Bill Gates who strongly suggested we tax the productivity of AI rather than taxing
ah,
income.
that's a great idea. I like that idea. Yes, they need to
Because,
come up with some answers fast, very
well, I
fast.
mean, if you think about it, income tax is kind of a 1918 version of productivity tax, right? It's a way to tax productivity, except as an individual's productivity, and it's pretty basic model, but it's pretty basic model that was come up with over 100 years ago.
Uh,
And by the way, I believe in paying your taxes.
yeah, me too.
The four figures I give to Ottawa every month suggests that. But I also believe that the way we're taxed is not fundamentally fair. That there's, a lot of very large entities not paying their fair share. I think shifting the burden to those entities and away from the beleaguered consumer is probably a 21st century way of looking at taxation.
Oh, I agree. I agree, especially if you're going to replace workers with AI because you don't have to give it days off or health benefits.
Well,
So
indeed, and as somebody from who I also work in with political parties,
you do?
I absolutely do.
This is the first I've heard of it. Totally kidding.
And so revenue is important. Tax revenue is really important, and I can't underestimate the importance of tax revenue. It really keeps fire engines on the road, as Christine suggested. It really
Yeah.
does. It keeps them Dalmatians fed.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
But wait,
so and I think that's where we're going to go in the future. If AI does continue to displace jobs, I think we're going
well,
to have to start taxing productivity
yeah, I agree.
at the factory end, not the factory worker end.
Yes, totally agree. We can't pay anymore at this point. By the
Okay.
way, interesting though, before you
Hmm?
switch topics, uh, so ChatGPT, people are starting to lose interest in it, it looks like.
Well, visits to the site are down. But could that be because there's more? I was looking at that story and wondering, is that because people are actually going there less, or there's more apps to go there for you?
It's possible. It's definitely possible, but it is down 10% in the US. And then Bard's chatbot Bard doesn't even rank in the top 3. So, but it is interesting that people are not going there as often. The truth is, it's like any fad, when it first comes out, everyone rushes to it and then it drops off because there are people that find it's not all that useful for them. So I have a feeling it's probably something like that. But what you're saying is also probably part of it as well. So, and they're probably actually a little happy because they're running out of GPUs to serve
Yes, it's cost you.
ChatGPT. So he said in the congressional hearings, I'd be really happy if people stopped using it as much because we are running out of GPUs. So I paraphrase, but yeah. But I do think it's interesting. I do think a lot of people aren't going to find it all that useful for them, over time, because if you're not a programmer, you're not doing what we do for a living, you're not in science or medicine or something like that, you may find it's not all that useful to write your emails with ChatGPT. Plus, if you get busted doing that with like a significant, important email, like I know people that have their kids write their Mother's Day cards with ChatGPT. I was like, no, don't
No,
do
nothing
that.
shows love like having a bot write your Mother's Day card for you.
Exactly. Don't do that. This is wrong.
Hey, this just in. This is our breaking news section of the podcast.
Oh, I got one too. You go first.
According to The Guardian, Twitter is threatening to sue Meta over threats. In a letter to CEO Mark Zuckerberg, a lawyer for the Elon Musk-owned app reportedly said Meta had unlawfully misappropriated trade secrets.
Oh, really?
Meta has engaged in systemic, willful, and unlawful misappropriation of Twitter's trade secrets and other intellectual property. I'm guessing they hired somebody that Musk
Oh,
fired.
see, that was my story for you, a breaking story. Apparently, Meta hired a bunch of Twitter employees that were fired by Musk.
There you go, right? Listeners, I swear to God, I did not know that, and she did not know that.
I did not know that. I was just going to tell you. I just saw it come through Twitter.
That's phenomenal. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he's really going to sue on because, he could sue on iconography or stuff like that. The algorithms maybe, but they're not using those algorithms yet on Threads. I can tell you that by being there.
And they're using
So
Instagram's network, not like I imagine they're using Instagram's networking tool. I don't know how those handshakes are made or remembered, but not Twitter's.
yeah, and also they're going to be a federated site too, which Twitter is not. Federated, for people who don't know, just means you're open to things like Mastodon hooking into you. But it's interesting. It will be. I think the cage match is definitely going to still be on.
I guess this is our update on the only thing that really matters is the cage match between Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. As far as we know, it's still on. And I understood one of the hotels in Vegas that actually offered, was it the Grand?
Yeah.
Has offered space.
Yeah, they have. And the funny thing is, Musk suing Zuckerberg. Do you think Zuckerberg's Facebook lawyers haven't gone over this by every niche and cranny of launching this being so similar to Twitter? I'm sure
I think Facebook's lawyers make enough money to get front row seats to watch Zuckerberg mop the floor with Musk, is what I think.
I think so too. I actually know a Facebook lawyer here in Vegas. Really, really nice guy, works in privacy. Smart as a whip. I really don't think the legal team at Facebook went, let's just steal stuff and we'll just take the lawsuits later. I doubt that happened. So they're probably just different enough that a lot of the property stuff won't count. And even though they took over Twitter employees, which I think is hilarious.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, me, I'm not a Zuckerberg fan, and he's done a lot of very wrong things. But in the battle of Zuck versus Musk, yeah, I'll take Zuck's product over Musk's product, especially after every time he comes up, and this is just my personal opinion on the pattern of his forcing people to pay him. Every time it comes up where his balloon payment is due on the money he took from the banks, because if he doesn't pay that balloon payment, they can make him pay them $14 billion instantly. Like, that's the deal. So every time there's a balloon payment coming up, he finds some way he thinks he's going to force people to pay him, which just makes people mad. And some people pay him, but a lot of people don't. So he did that because TweetDeck now is going to be paid for. You won't be able to use TweetDeck without paying for a verified, which is not verified. We got to call it something else, just a blue check. So, but interesting, very interesting that he's now suing. So we'll have more to report when we know more. Right now,
I'm sure this will go on.
Yeah, that's all the detail right now. He's suing over intellectual property. That's it. Oh, I know.
This isn't a Google product. Chances are threads will go on.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking
Yeah.
of, this is a bit of a shift of a gear, but we're getting into something that's actually really near and dear to me. Christine, I'm sorry, this is not part of uh, 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 our story list, but I'm pretty sure you saw this report. It's in Search Engine Roundtable today. And this one's near and dear to me. It's about site structure, but it's about blogs, so I don't really care.
Yeah. It's just about blogs though, not really. I read this one. It's not site structure just necessarily, just blogs.
Well, okay, this is about blogs, yeah, but I don't see why Google doesn't. This drives me crazy. Okay, first off, blog doesn't mean anything. Blog is a 4-letter word. Blogs is a 5-letter word that starts with B. It's not really sorting anything or helping Google find relevancy in anything if you use the folder blogs. So the story is John Mueller, in reply to a question, says it doesn't matter if you put your blog posts in a blog specific folder. Google doesn't care. Google's going to find that blog post if it's in the root or if it's in the blog specific folder, and based on the structure of the post, it's going to know what it is. It knows it's an opinion piece, it's a blog piece. It knows what it is.
Nah.
It knows if
Mm.
it's trying to sell something, it knows it's trying to sell something because it can read. So this is about your blog. This isn't about a highly specialized piece of industrial machinery or even skin cream. This is about your blog. So some SEOs absolutely insist that you have to put things in the proper structure.
You
So
do? I'm gonna have to.
url.com.ca.co.uk, whatever,
Yes.
/blog/title of blog post. Other SEOs say, yeah, it don't matter. Throw it anywhere.
Yeah. I'm
Mueller
an S.
says it doesn't matter.
I
Throw it
know.
anywhere. We're not wrong.
Yeah. He's wrong.
Now, okay, I don't think he's wrong exactly, but I'm one of those SEOs who is kind of like an electrician and really wants to see a nice, orderly power panel. I want to see those wires coming out in an orderly fashion, and I want it to be really easy to trace wire to outlet in house. So I feel the same way about about site structure. Files need to identify with a place that they should reside.
Well, I've talked to John about this before. Okay. By the way, John sounds a little spicy here. He's like, John said, sometimes SEOs tell you myths about getting better ranking one way or the other. They're wrong. Then he added, sometimes they tell you not to listen to anyone from Google. Sometimes they're right, but not this time. I never tell anyone not to listen to John, but you have to listen to John like you listen to Matt, and the devil's in the tiny, tiny details. But but for when I asked John about this, I said, but John, you said in one post it does matter in linking, but it doesn't matter in structure. Right. Well, okay, so that's where the tiny, tiny detail is, right? No, Google doesn't need the structure itself, but when you link and it crawls the link, then that matters. So if you don't have the structure, you don't have the structure in your link. So I
How
said
does
it's
how
just,
does how does that affect how does that structure in the link affect Google's crawl?
well, Google disambiguates your site name from once it gets into your site, right? So if everything's off the root, you're telling it nothing about the pages. And then the link tells it something about the pages. What's the next page going to be? And the anchor text tells you what the next page is going to be. So if you have no structure and everything's off the root and everything's important, then you tell Google nothing about your site. So you're giving Google information through the link structure, through the link itself. And then that is your URL structure though. So I couldn't get him to tell me how they were different. He's like, well, yeah, no, that's true. The link structure matters in the crawl internally with the anchor text, but doesn't matter as site structure. And I'm like, what? So I didn't get an answer on that, but I do know, and you worked on this project with me, Jim, that when we did take a site that had no structure and we
Yep.
put one piece of structure in, we just made one folder for their main content. 3 months later, all that content was the top ranking content on their site.
And
Because
by the way, if you remember correctly, that webmaster had originally screwed up, and blogs were posts, and posts for blogs.
Yeah, pages. Yeah, but yeah. In WordPress, yeah,
Yeah.
they were. And I don't think you
So
need to say blog. I don't think blog matters. And that's the thing where the detail is in this one is blog doesn't matter, but your structure does matter.
yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at the responses to John's advice here, and every SEO is who's giving advice is falling on the site structure is important
Well, and we know it from
side.
just doing it. Anytime I've worked with a client that doesn't have site structure and we've worked on their site structure, those pages suddenly are the ones that get the best visibility and traffic. And because we saw what happened on the one site we worked on. I
Oh,
mean, everything was under that new structure we put in for one folder. Because now, I mean, we should say one main folder. There were subfolders, but then Google had indications of what content was there, as
yep.
opposed to everything's off the root. And so we don't. Everything's important. Nothing's. Google likes a site to be like a good book. Navigation is your table of contents. You have clarity on your pages. You have content and subcontent. That's what a structure is. If you just open up a book, there's no table of contents and there's no delineation between chapters or subchapters, that would be a really difficult book to like. I'm not talking about like a fiction book, but I just mean like a academic type book. That'd be a very difficult book to understand what the book was about.
See, but at this point, I think Google is going to find that content and will understand it because Google's a very good reader. However, you're making it much easier for Google,
Yes,
and
yeah, you're making it easier.
and I believe that you're improving your chances of getting a stronger ranking. Not only that, but let's say you're working on a website that belongs to a company. It's not your website, but you're one of many people who has or will be working on that website. Honest to goodness, leave a tidy environment for the people coming after you. And heck, leave a tidy environment for you that morning when you wake up and there's a big crisis and you need to solve problems immediately. Trust me, that tiny environment helps a lot.
Well, yeah, you really want to make you want to make it as clean for Google as possible, right? So you don't have
Well,
any
and
site
for
structure.
yourself and
Well,
for other
yourself
people
too.
working on the
Yeah,
website later.
I agree. Totally agree. But I'm saying when it comes to SEO, you want to make your signals as clean and clear as possible. So sure, you don't have to put in the structure. John says they'll try to figure it out, but that doesn't mean they will figure it out. And if you're being very clear and concise about what your structure is, what your pages are about, your internal linking, where your topics are, what your topics are, what your subtopics are, it's much easier for Google to ingest what you're doing and much easier for it to return you for relevancy, which, as we learned earlier in this podcast today, is the most important part of SEO, is that you're relevant. And so if you give it a lot of signals, then it's easier for it to determine what's relevant when it's trying to pull back something for a search. So I'm not saying John, I adore John. John's awesome. But I'm just saying that the devil's in the details. It doesn't matter if you put the word blog in there, but site structure, because of linking, internal linking, does matter.
We got time for one last thing, and I'm jumping on this one, Christine, because it's driving me nuts.
What's that?
Okay, so Google has sundowned Universal Analytics 3.
Mm-hmm.
It might still be recording data, but it's whatever. It's going away. It's gone. Basically, it's gone. Webmasters are switching over to other analytics packages, trying them out. Some of them are useful, some of them aren't. But you know what's driving me nuts?
What?
Many of them are leaving head-breaking code in the head of a
Don't give away my
website.
secret. Don't give away my secret.
Oh, this is driving me nuts. I came across another one today on
Yes.
you've seen this client of mine. The I can't even describe what industry they're in because it'll give away who they are. But they're a pretty behemoth ecom website, and they're trying out a different analytics package on my recommendation. Damn it! And really, oh my goodness! I mean, so suddenly I'm inspecting. I'm using F12 Inspector, and this div tag just jumps out and hits me in the jugular vein.
Boom. Easy catch.
It almost nicked my jugular vein. I'm telling you, the damn thing's dangerous.
But shoot, now you're giving away my secret because whenever I take on an audit, that's the first thing I check and send over. So it's a quick fix that can make a big difference if it's causing a big problem. So
Well,
that's
so listeners out there, call Christine first, and if she tells you this, follow it. But if you can't afford to call Christine, and many of you can't, but many of you, most of you can. But anyway, but the point is, if there's something that's going to break or inhibit the crawler from getting from point A to point Z in the head of your website, reading all the meta information that's supposed to be in there, if it closes the head before that stuff is read, it don't get read. In fact,
yeah.
often Google just goes away. It doesn't even read the content.
Well, yeah, I actually checked this with Martin Split from
Hmm?
Google. So I was asking him, is the issue with the invalid HTML or like image, HTML image, or there's one other thing that breaks the head.
Div
I said,
tag
does it,
break ahead.
that's it. I was like, does it always close it? He goes, always. It will always close it at that point.
So okay,
So
so at that point, is everything beforehand? Is that looked at?
that's looked at, but nothing afterwards. Basically what it does is it writes an open body tag and an ending head tag. And so it figures you have HTML here. Well, that should be in the body. So why is it in the head? It's not. We're going to close the head and now we're opening the body. So everything below that doesn't get read. So sometimes it's not that traumatic. I tell people if they have like a third-party tool that they have to have in the head because somebody didn't bother to check that when they created the tool, put it right above the closing head tag because you're doing the same thing. You're closing the head there. But if it's like in the middle and your CSS is under it or your JavaScript or anything Google needs to render the page, you could actually drop pages out of the index, which happened to a client that I audited last year around this time, and they were down 80, 90%. And I went and found they had a head tag issue, breaking the head, and we fixed it, and they went up 110%. 156 of their pages out of 900 had been de-indexed.
But
And they
I'm
were
telling
like,
you, I'm seeing this happen more
yeah,
frequently, and it's driving me
yeah.
nuts.
It's because of it's because of the third-party tools that do
Yeah.
it. But people need to be aware that if you have it down, especially if you don't see an update anytime recently, go check for this because Google has to have the CSS and the JavaScript to render the page. If they cannot render your page, your JavaScript or your CSS is inaccessible because in this case, the head closed, right? And now it's not reading it. It will drop those pages out of the index. It has to be able to read your what renders your page. So your CSS and JavaScript have to be available. That's true for everything, but this is just one of the ways that can be broken.
Well, yeah, that's one of the ways that'll stop it. And again, Christine, go talk to somebody about this, would you? It's driving me crazy. Okay, we've
Third-party
gone.
tools.
Yeah, hey, all you third-party tool makers out there, do it right, please. Or give explicit instructions to bury it at the bottom of the head. Like
Hey,
explicitly tell people this.
but it makes you look like such a genius when I solved this for a client in the first like day of getting an audit.
Well, you know what? I've seen your audits. You have a bunch of other tricks up your sleeve too. So I'm not
Okay.
killing your business here.
No, you're not. I'm just teasing, but thank you.
Okay, we've gone full circle. It's end of show on the 6th of July, 2023. On behalf of Christine Chaklinger from Sites Without Walls, this is Jim Hedger from Digital Always Media. Be kind to each other, rank well, don't get so angry online. I mean, seriously, it's only Facebook or Twitter or Threads. It's really not that important. Keep your blood
Oh,
pressure down, be a good webmaster, keep invalid HTML elements out of the head,
oh,
rank
we
well.
forgot one important thing
Oh no,
before we
no,
sign
what's
off.
up? What's up?
One important thing. Next week, I will be in Amsterdam.
Oh shoot, that's right.
I will be in Amsterdam on the show. So I will be talking to you from across the pond. That's it.
Next week, Christine is speaking at a conference in Amsterdam, and we'll be coming to you from this conference.
Yes.
What's the conference?
It's I'll be live gaming. It's a gaming affiliate conference, like real gambling gaming. I'm speaking on Chat GPT.
I bet you that's a lot of fun. Okay, so next week, Christine's coming to us from Europe, and we'll still be here, same bat time, same bat channel. Be well, be kind. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.